Welcome to The Wall. Today, we bring you the case of a liberal teacher who ended up being fired from her school for indoctrinating her students with gender ideology. But first, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, because your support helps us a lot. Now, let's get started.
Like everybody else, I just got about 20 texts that Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck. All I have to say about this is that he's not an innocent man. So let's not pretend that an innocent man was just shot, because that man has said some incredibly horrible things, and let's not forget the impact that he has had on the politics of this country and all the other people's lives that have been affected because of what he does and what he's paid by billionaires to do. That's all I got to say for now.
When you can't condemn the cold-blooded murder of a family man, we're not talking about politics. We're talking about something being seriously wrong in your head. Having ideological differences does not turn the other person into a monster. It just makes them someone who does not share your values. But when a teacher thinks that way and then brings it into the classroom, it stops being an opinion and becomes indoctrination. That is why the administration ended up calling her into the office.
That's it. That's the TikTok that got me barred from my classroom. And you know what really sucks? It has nothing to do with what's in that memo. Nothing. It had nothing to do with my teaching practices, with my relationships with students, with how I dressed, with teaching hair. It had nothing to do with teaching. It's literally only because I whistle blew on TikTok instead of going through the appropriate channels to file a grievance. And now I don't get to finish the year with my students. It just feels so fucking wrong. It feels so wrong. It just feels... I fucking love these kids. I would fucking die for... I would die for them.
As always, I'm going to show you the evidence that led to her being fired. Because when a teacher decides to take a conflict with the administration to TikTok and turns it into a campaign of ideological victimhood, it stops being an internal matter and becomes a public problem for the school. And that is the point. You are not there to put your activism into other people's children's heads. You are there to educate. When you cross that line, the problem is not the school, it is you.
I literally sacrificed so much to teach this year. I gave up my social life. I gave up sleep. I fucking didn't sleep this whole year. I'm not a morning person. And I was waking up at 6 a.m. and going to bed at 2 in the morning because I was learning geometry and stuff about the planets. And it just feels like the only people who acknowledged how much work I was putting into the kids were them and their parents, and that's it. And that's it. This was the hardest I've worked in my entire life, with the most responsibilities and the lowest pay I've ever had. Ever. And now I'm not allowed back in my classroom because I'm a Gen Z who made a TikTok. And honestly, if I could take it back, knowing that it would mean that I wasn't going to be able to see my students again, obviously I would do that. I offered to sign an NDA. I offered to make a settlement agreement. I offered to let them write a script for a TikTok that I would make apologizing to let me back with my students. And they said I can never come back to that campus again. At least not with those acts.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Do you see now why mocking a family man is not okay? You were hired to be a teacher, to teach useful things, not politics, not gender ideology, not to indoctrinate students into hating their country. And now everyone will be asking what exactly she said in that video. Well, judge for yourselves in the following clip.
Okay, so today I got pulled into a check-in meeting with my administrator at school, and she had this lovely list of concerns that she wanted to bring to my attention. But my favorite amongst them is, we've noticed an intentional attempt at teaching your students about their legal and constitutional rights. That's the concern. They're concerned. Why are you concerned? Why is that a concern? Why is it a concern? Why is it a concern? Why does that concern you? Why is it a concern?
Elementary school children learning about legal rights. That was her first video, but in the second video, you can really see how she behaved with the students and what the school was actually concerned about.
Just for like some context and clarity here, this concern particularly came about after they started to notice that my third grade students, my class, was sitting during the Pledge of Allegiance during our assemblies, and which they decided to do for themselves after learning during Holocaust Remembrance Week about propaganda and the Hitler Youth, and why Hitler targeted young people and students and children in particular to spread his ideology. And they were curious actually about where the Pledge of Allegiance came from in the United States. And we looked it up together and discovered that after the Civil War, when the country was divided about slavery, they needed to bring the country together. And who best to instill patriotism than young children, because it's easier to learn than to unlearn. And so in like the 70s, I don't remember, they created the Pledge of Allegiance and required it be said in classrooms across the United States, in response to the country being like fraught over, the issue of like owning Black people. And they added the under God part in the 1970s because Republicans were afraid of communism, classic, and atheism. And so my kids, my students, decided amongst themselves that they didn't want to do that anymore, and they wanted to actually protest the Pledge of Allegiance. And instead of getting in trouble for being disruptive, which is what they initially wanted to do, I told them that there is also silent protesting, which is sometimes more powerful than being loud and disruptive and getting yourselves into trouble. Then I told them about Colin Kaepernick, and they decided that they would rather sit during the Pledge of Allegiance. And my admin doesn't believe that they are staying seated for reasons that they can fully articulate and fully understand, and is concerned that I am, she said, indoctrinating my students, indoctrinating them. And I am just so grateful that I'm finally getting acknowledged for all the hard work I have done this year to indoctrinate my students into being critical thinkers and making decisions for themselves, and not just because an authority tells them that they have to.
Oh, hell no!
So she said it herself, without a shred of shame. She is proud of having indoctrinated her students. That alone completely destroys the whole act that she was fired unfairly. But I want you to focus on the word indoctrinate, because this woman is a political activist. And when a teacher turns a classroom into a space for activism against the symbols, values, and foundations of her own country, we are no longer talking about education. We are talking about ideological conditioning from early childhood. That is why she was fired. It was not an unjustified dismissal when you are clearly saying you are proud to have indoctrinated them. Now watch the following video of her acting as a political activist.
Women.
Of course, thank you. I am here in opposition of SB 12 and SB 1601.
My name is Sophia Di Loretto Chetty. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a third grade teacher here in Austin. If you don't have a student in elementary school, that means that I spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week with 8 and 9-year-olds. I heard someone earlier expressing support for this bill because drag, quote, exposes children to things that they are not ready for. However, if any of my students were able to join me here today, they would have absolutely no issue explaining gender expression or gender identity to you, something many of you clearly do not understand. And I get it, it's easy to be afraid of things you don't understand, but I can assure you, these things to elementary school students are easy and obvious, and they do not fear drag queens because they know they have no reason to. February and March are Black and Women's History Months, and over the last 2 months, my students learned the history of Marsha P. Johnson, a key historical figure in the LGBTQ rights movement. They were appalled that Marsha faced such hate and discrimination just for wanting to wear the clothes that made her feel comfortable. Like I said, the kids get it. And honestly, it's shameful that you're using them as a political weapon against a community that they may one day join if they haven't already. To me, it is clear that drag is not something that children are too young to understand and be exposed to, but actually something that many of you are too old and closed-minded to be making laws about. What is most disturbing to me about this conversation and the language of this bill is that its supporters is that your rationale continues to be that men dressing up in what you call women's clothing is what make drag queens sexual performers. But by making this argument, you are outlining your underlying belief that women's bodies and women's clothes are inherently sexual. It is deeply disturbing to me that this rhetoric will continue to uphold dangerous ideas about women and girls that put our lives and our bodies at risk. It is that rhetoric, not drag shows, that put our children in danger of sexual predators. I urge you all to vote no on these bills and focus your energy and efforts on the issues that actually put children in danger, like not having enough counselors on the school campus because the state continues to deny adequate funding to schools.
Thank you for your testimony.
Madam Chair.
Her pronouns are she/they. Seeing this, tell me whether the school is right or not when a third grade teacher publicly says that any of her students can stand up and talk about gender ideology as if it were completely normal. We are talking about 8 and 9-year-old children. As a father, I do not want a person like that anywhere near my children, because one thing is teaching, and something very different is stepping into ideological territory that belongs first and foremost to the family. Today in this country, many children know more about politics, activism, and ideology than they do about math, writing, or basic logic. They do not write well, they cannot solve problems without a calculator, they cannot think without a phone, and now on top of that they want to sell us this as progress. These teachers are not teaching. They are indoctrinating. Because it makes no sense for people who act as if the family were an obstacle to want to become the main voice in shaping other people's children. Meanwhile, in China and in several Asian countries, children stand out in programming, mathematics, science, and engineering. While here we keep producing generations obsessed with social media, empty activism, digital fame, and ridiculous degrees that do nothing to raise a country's real product. We've reached the end of the video, but before we go, the questions are for you. Do you think the school was right to fire her? Why do so many teachers today seem more interested in being activists than in teaching? If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Your support means a lot to us and motivates us to keep creating more content. Stay tuned for the next powerful video from the wall.